Okay, the Interwar Years is chapter 26. I hope you're all doing well. The map that you see on the first page here is the post-World War I map after the Paris Peace Conference and the Treaty of Versailles. I'm just going to go back because I didn't get in class to talk about the Paris Peace Conference and the Treaty of Versailles, and it's so important to World War II that we're just going to take a few minutes to do that. You'll see you've got new country there, Czechoslovakia. Hungary is an independent country. Poland is ginormous again. And if you notice that little piece, I don't know if my cursor will show you, is right here, where they gave them this little bit of access to the sea. Which good and bad, good and bad. You got the USSR there, which is officially the USSR in 1922. Italy as a unified nation, Yugoslavia. You'll see places like Serbia not on the map, Montenegro, Kosovo, those things that are in your Eastern Europe map today that at this point were Yugoslavia. Okay, so if we go forward, faster. The only reason why I left this slide in here is because I want you to know that the Treaty of Versailles was signed at the Paris Peace Conference. Many kids, when we get to the reviewing piece, there is an essay question that talks about, were the terms and conditions, or how did the Paris Peace Conference set up World War II? And kids always go, huh, what? What is that? I'm like, the Treaty of Versailles? Oh, and then they could write for pages. But you have to know that the Paris Peace Conference was the peace conference that ended World War I. It wasn't just the Treaty of Versailles that was signed there, but that certainly was the big one. So here were your clauses, or whatever we want to call them. Sorry, the words are not finding me this morning. I know most of you are sitting there thinking they don't find me in the afternoon. Okay, the Treaty of Versailles, you've got 5 main ideas behind the treaty, and that's why I keep clicking, because for some reason the last bullet is not coming up there. Anyway, you've got Article 231, which is the guilt clause. Now this is the most important one, because this is what will leave Germany wanting revenge. They had to send some poor schmuck to sign this piece of paper that said Germany was completely responsible for World War I. They took complete responsibility and they were willing to pay reparations. Now they didn't name the amount, and this treaty, they will name the amount later to be $33 billion, or the equivalent to $33 billion, but they didn't name it here. They also had to make their army only 100,000 men, no air force, and a very small navy, only to protect their trading ships. They lost Alsace and Lorraine, and this is why there's no other bullet, and they lost all their other colonies that they had gathered or gained during imperialism. They also had to have the land east and west of the Rhine that was a strict demilitarized zone. So that's the border with France. Basically, the Treaty of Versailles is an attempt to safeguard France from any future aggression. All right, so where it left us is right now where it left us. The other treaties that ended the war redrew, as we saw, those Eastern European nations. They attempted to do it based on self-determination, or the right to rule your own government, but we know that there's so many different nationalities and ethnic groups in that Eastern Europe region that it became very difficult, and they did not do a good job. The other part was the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire no longer exists. They had controlled the Middle East. France and Britain will take over that region. They will divide the land into 6 mandates based on trading access, resources, oil, without too much of a care for the people that live there and whether they get along or not. So this will create a significant amount of problems going forward as well. Overall, you've got Eastern Europe, which continues to be a mess, and then on the western border, you've got France, who is really left to stand alone. The United States will turn its back on Europe just very shortly after World War I. You've got Great Britain, who really is going to back off to rebuild. They're not strong industrially anymore, and so they try and retreat to their isolationism. And then you've got Eastern Europe, which are quite a few unpredictable dictators at this point. France sought allies in Eastern Europe to replace Russia because it was, well, they didn't have a lot of army. It was certainly a deterrent for Germany when France and Russia were aligned. So France tries to replace Russia with places like Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia and Romania, but none of them are a replacement for Russia. But they certainly are, they're certainly wanting revenge. So really the peace settlement made no one happy. Germany's angry, France is isolated, not because they want to be, but because they have to be. Britain, they back off, the US backs off, and so here we go. The biggest issue continues to be Germany. Now these will start your 26 notes. The British post-war, so we're talking the 20s, they decided that they wanted to kiss and make up. That they were guided by their economist, John Maynard Keynes, and he really is the father of modern economics. You'll learn that next year. But he had two ideas. He believed, one, that German markets needed to recover if Britain was going to recover. That Germany is the biggest economy in Europe, and if they're not going to recover, no one else is really going to be as profitable as they could be. So he believed that Europe's recovery kind of hinged upon German recovery, so you couldn't totally screw them over with reparations because otherwise no one was going to recover. The other thing that this John Maynard Keynes came up with was deficit spending, and so for the first time you kind of wonder how did our government get $17 trillion in the hole? Well, it's all this guy's fault. No, just kidding. But John Maynard Keynes said in order to stimulate the economy, it's okay if the government spends more than it takes in. And so this is the era of deficit spending to stimulate economies. All right, so France then, they disagreed greatly with the British. They were not ready to kiss and make up. They were still mad. I mean, after all, the war was fought almost exclusively on French soil. They have the trenches, they have all the infrastructure to repair, landmines that are ticking all over the farm fields there in France. So they pushed for reparations. They needed the money. They had an incredible amount of devastation, and they were really afraid. They had huge reconstruction costs. They had huge debt to the United States. So France was still in that blame Germany, make Germany pay for this big, huge mess we have. Britain really sat in a better spot. So what's going to happen is 1921, it's kind of nice to say 1921, the Reparations Committee is going to meet and they're going to order Germany to pay this reparations bill of $33 billion, which is the equivalent of about 132 billion gold marks, which is your German currency. They will pay the first payment. So the first payment, 2.5 billion, supposed to be paid 2.5 billion marks annually. So they pay the first one, and then after they pay the first one, they say they can't pay. They're like, we need a 3-year stay. We've got all this inflation. We got all sorts of problems. The British say, okay, you can have 3 years so that you're able to pay. And France says, no way, you got to pay now. I mean, they really only paid the first time because France threatened to invade this Ruhr region. Ruhr, we're going to say that a few more times. It's R-U-H-R, in order to pay. So they paid the first time because of the threat to invade the Ruhr. So 1922, the Weimar Republic basically says, that's great and all, you can invade the Ruhr, but we don't have any money. So 1922, the Weimar Republic, which is your German government, the Allies refused to negotiate with William II. They said you have to have a constitution, a constitutional government before we will let you out of the war, out of World War I, before the armistice is signed. So they create this hastily thrown together republic under the leadership of this guy named Ebert, and we'll talk more about that on Monday. But the Weimar Republic, they refuse to pay, so this Germany refuses to pay, and so French send troops to the Ruhr to try and get the resources. They say, if you're not going to pay us, we're going to come in and we're going to take it. So their plan, fairly typical French plan, is because the Ruhr is an industrial mining center, they thought that they'd continue to have the German workers work, and then they'd just collect what they made and what they took out of their mines and what they produced in their factories as their payment, which is all fine and good. There's the hairy French occupying the Ruhr, so it's just across the river is where it is in Germany. The German response then to the French occupation and trying to pillage their factories and mines was to ordered the workers to stop working. they said, don't worry, we're going to pay you anyway. We'll pay you unemployment, but we don't want you to work because we don't want the French to get anything, which might have been a perfectly fine plan had the Germans had any money. But they don't have any money, so how do they get money? They print money. And printing money, we know, is a really bad idea. So here's the devaluation of the German mark. So 1914, if you see this, I mean, you guys can read, but the number of German marks to the every US dollar is, for every US dollar, so $1 is 4 marks. All right, 1919, when the war is over, inflation hit pretty bad, it's 14 marks. By 1921, after the first reparations payment was made, it was 76 marks for every US dollar. After the occupation and the printing money episode, it's 4.6 million, and then I believe that number is trillion by November of 1923. So for every US dollar, you needed 4 trillion marks. Well, no one has 4 trillion marks to buy a loaf of bread. So certainly it was the barter system in Germany. They were not, their currency was completely worthless. So these are some of my favorite pictures. I don't know if they showed them to you last year, but on the left is a boy, or a girl and a boy, using the money as blocks. And so they're building with big stacks of German marks. And then the right one, you've got the lady who's shoving the money into her oven or her fireplace to heat her home. And you know it's bad when you're throwing piles of money to burn just to heat your home. So complete devaluation and collapse to the German economy because the German money lost all value. All right. So as you write down, result: terrible inflation and complete economic collapse. So a guy named Stresemann comes to power in 1923, and he went, yeah, this isn't working. So he calls off the strike and asks the Allies, the British, the French, the United States, to reevaluate Germany's ability to pay. They said, you know, we can't pay. Certainly what we did didn't work. The French also lost money in the region because it cost them more to occupy than they got out of the mines that no one was working in. All right, so they call off the strike and ask them to reevaluate their ability to pay. On a side note, this complete collapse of the German economy, and then when the German economy completely collapses again, it totally wipes out the middle class, which is a really strong group. Even post-World War I, it's a really strong group in Germany. And psychologically, after this economic crisis in the 20s, not that it gives you a reason, but it does give a little bit of a reason and glimpse into how people could follow someone so crazy in Germany and so radical, because he solved the financial crisis and people kind of looked the other way, like they did when Robespierre was cutting heads off. That because people were eating, they just looked the other way, and then Robespierre died. Hitler doesn't die; it's then too late, and people are like, "Oh crap!" But psychologically, the damage that this financial crisis had on the middle class was really, I mean, think about shoving $100 bills in a fire to heat your home. I mean, that's some rough stuff. Okay, so because I'm now running out of time, we need the economic recovery. And so the economic recovery will come in the plan of the Dawes Plan. So this is their reevaluation of Germany's ability to pay. And that's why 1924 to 1929 are known as the hopeful years. So you got to think of them as the hopeful years. There's 5 hopeful years in all this time. So the Dawes Plan cut the reparations and then set up a loan repayment program. So how it works, the money starts in the United States. They loan $2.5 billion to Germany. Germany keeps $500 million for recovery, then pays $2 billion in reparations payments to the Allies, and the Allies use it to pay $2.6 billion back to the United States in war debt. And then the next year it happens again. And it really, what it does is it just floods money into Europe, into the European economies. It kind of looks like funny money but it puts money in there, and they are able to recover really quite nicely, which sets up 2 political treaties and kind of peacefulness. So the hopeful years economic is the Dawes Plan. The hopeful years for the politics are the Treaty of Locarno, all right, which is the spirit of Locarno. Locarno, anyone? Where is it? Where is it at? It's in Switzerland. Germany will recognize the new western boundaries. So they don't touch the boundaries in the east, but Germany signs the Treaty of Locarno as kind of their peace settlement. to end World War I, the one that they say, okay, we recognize basically the loss of Alsace and Lorraine, and we're moving on. The last one, because we got to do it quick, is the Kellogg-Briand. It condemns war as an instrument of national policy and agrees to settle disputes peacefully, but it doesn't say anything if you don't settle disputes peacefully, what might happen. I'm out of time. More to continue.